As promised in my Beretta ARX video, you see this rifle again. This will actually probably be the last time you see it because I'm about to sell it. So I figured I would knock this video out while I still can. This is going to be, as the title suggests, a comparison between the Galil ACE NATO, specifically the Gen 1, and the ARX. These two rifles are mechanically very different. The Galil is, of course, essentially an AK. The Beretta has its constant contact short stroke gas piston system, whereas the Galil is long stroke AK. The Beretta has a Eugene Stoner inspired bolt. And of course the Beretta, they both make use of polymer. However, the polymer use is much more extensive on the Beretta. This gives the Beretta its biggest advantage really over the Galil, and that is it's a pretty light rifle. This rifle, as set up here, weighs right at 7 pounds, whereas this bad boy weighs over 9 pounds. That is a very significant difference, particularly if you've ever had to carry a rifle long distance. The old adage that ounces equal pounds and pounds equals pain definitely applies in a military context. But otherwise, these two rifles are actually fairly similar in concept. Both of them try to be of the same basic layout as a FN Scar or a CZ Bren HKG 36. You know, this sort of modern side-folding, collapsible stocked, monolithic upper rail, receivered, current generation assault rifle. And honestly, neither one of them really succeeds very well in that point. I've already gone over what I believe to be the deficiencies of the Beretta ARX. In the comments section, someone else pointed out some more deficiencies that he ran into, some rather significant ones. Going over them briefly, the ergonomics are just strange. We've got small, stiff levers, a button that doesn't really make sense to hold open the magazine. Hold open the bolt. This bolt hold open is probably the best feature of the rifle. We've got a very stiff, heavy trigger, a stock hinge that does not inspire confidence, a stock itself that is short and not terribly comfortable. This concave checkered butt plate is not the most pleasant against the shoulder. We've got sling mounts that are less than ideal, and accuracy that is acceptable but nothing more than acceptable, roughly 3 MOA. Other than that, I liked this rifle. I continue to like this rifle. However, I don't like it enough to keep it. The Galil, on the other hand, again, is basically an AK. It is heavier than most AKs, nearly all of them that you'll find. Everything on the Galil is very stiff. Folding the stock is a chore. Disassembly is a chore. Disassembling an AK is pretty trivial. However, they made the top cover so tight on this that it definitely takes a little bit of effort to disassemble it and reassemble it. I think overall, I'm going to give you a spoiler alert of my opinion of the Galil ACE. I do not think that it is an improvement at all over a Comblock AK. That's a controversial take. You know, the internet will tell you, oh, it's like an AK, but better. It's not. It's not better at all. It may be a little bit more accurate, and when you're handling it, you can tell that it's built with, we'll call it capitalist build quality in mind. However, when you actually sit down and look at how the rifle functions and the feature set, I do not think this is a step forward in the AK. In fact, it's probably a step backwards. Boom, I said it. I crapped on the Galil, which happens to be my most expensive rifle. The biggest thing, of course, is its weight. It weighs a metric ton. You know, this is a 5.56 rifle that weighs more than many 308 or even 30-06 rifles. And while you might be tempted to say, well, that extra weight dampens the recoil, it's also pretty punchy. This one has a Landtech Dragon muzzle brake as well as a K&S gas piston, and even with that, it's still a fairly punchy rifle. I'd say recoil on these two is roughly identical, and both are more than most AR-15s. So for that extra weight, you're really not gaining anything at all. There's no benefit to it. It's all downsides. People sometimes act as if the selector lever on a Galil ACE is ambidextrous. It's not. I mean, there is a lever on this side that theoretically functions like the lever on a normal AK. However, it is stiff and short enough that it's really not very easy at all to actuate. You know, if you're planning on using your trigger finger on this, it's not going to be very effective. But this isn't meant to be such a review on the Galil ACE. I figured I would just get that off my chest because the internet loves these things, and I think they are kind of overrated. You know, I would say these two rifles are performance-wise very similar. The internet tends to be rather harsh on the ARX and rather fawning over the Galil ACE, but I do not think that one you can say is better than the other. If anything, from a soldier's perspective, this might be the preferable of the two simply because it weighs so much less. And it's also, while neither of these rifles are easy to disassemble, this one likes to bite you, but it's at least easier than the Galil. The Galil, if you had to disassemble it in a hurry, would be very frustrating, particularly if your hands were covered in mud or they were tired or sweaty or whatever. But some similarities in the rifles. Sling points. They're both terrible. You know, both of these I had to secure with 550 cord because there's really not much of a way of having a modern sling attached to either one. Both of them I had to add a front sling mount to for the same reason. The Israelis seem to have set their rifle up from the factory assuming you would use 550 cord. There is a little sling loop there at the front sight block, which I'm a little bit sketchy about. I'm sure that would get pretty hot. But the Beretta, on the other hand, the factory sling was secured with these very thin sort of ribbons. But neither one of them have very good sling points. The Beretta, to its credit, at least has multiple sling options, whereas the Galil, you pretty much just have the two from the factory. Both of them have very smooth bolts, to their credit. The Beretta, I would say, is smoother. Let's see if I can get this supported. Whereas the Galil is smooth for an AK, but it does still feel like an AK. as demonstrated there, this curtain that's meant to seal the action up moves out of the way when the bolt cycles. This is a cool feature on the Galil ACE. However, I'm not sure how useful it is in the real world. People sometimes talk about Galil ACEs as if they're an AK, but sealed up better. I mean, I guess, but you still have this big open port here. I'm not sure these do any better on mud tests than regular AKs. They may actually do worse because the tolerances are so much tighter. But one nice thing, both of these have ambidextrous mag releases, but on the Galil, this is a great feature. It has a truly big button, whereas on the Beretta, it's this tiny little thing. Also, mag compatibility. Neither one of these will work really with Gen 3 PMags. If I may rant a little bit about Gen 3 PMags, I think they should not be marketed as AR-15 or STEMAG magazines. There are very few rifles that I've ever tried that actually work with the Gen 3. I think the Gen 3 ought to be marketed as an HK416 mag that may possibly work with others as well. Because I've only had one AR-15 that worked with it, and a Steyr AUG I used to have worked with it. But the Beretta, it absolutely won't even insert. You know, those over travel stops conflict with the mag well, so you can't even get it to lock into place. On the Galil, it kind of works, but it doesn't drop free at all. I do not buy Magpul Gen 3 PMags. I think they are a niche product that is best relegated to HK use only. And since I don't own an HK, I have no use for them. Man, I'm kind of spicy today. I'm sorry. I'm in kind of a rushed mood, so I'm perhaps a little bit more critical than I normally am. So that's mag compatibility. Aside from that, both work beautifully with Gen 2 PMags. I've not run into issues with any aluminum or steel AR mags. This one actually shipped with a steel Beretta mag, which was very nice. I wish I could still find those Beretta mags. Used to be able to get them for $12 off Beretta's website. I wish I had stocked up, because that's one of my favorite magazines that I've ever had. And I can't recall if I've ever tried Lancers in them. I think I have, and I think they work fine. But Gen 2 PMags is what I use for pretty much everything, so that's my default. The selector levers. It is ambidextrous on the ARX. As I mentioned, it's quasi-ambidextrous on the Galil, but it's really, this is the way it really should be actuated. And it works pretty well. It's very nice, crisp, positive. It's actually a little bit more ergonomic, I'd say, than the AR-15 style rotating lever. A little bit quicker to actuate too. The Beretta is similar to an AR-15. It's a 90-degree throw, but it's stiff, and it does not have very much leverage either. And something about the lever itself just feels lower quality. The pistol grips. The Galil ACE, has this pistol grip that seems inspired by the what's been called the Russian SWAT pistol grip. It's sort of like the old Izhmash Saga 12 pistol grips, if you've ever seen those. It's comfortable. It gives you a simple pistol grip, allows a nice high grip, but there is nothing I can say bad about it. I think it would fit small hands well. I have perfectly average size hands, and fits me well, and I can't imagine even a large-handed Sasquatch man to complain about it. It's a well-designed pistol grip. It has a roughly almost Glock style pistol grip angle, which I think is ideal. The Beretta, on the other hand, uses this M16A2 inspired pistol grip, which I think is also perfectly fine. That suits my taste, but many people hate the A2 pistol grip, so take with that what you will. Stocks. The Galil ACE, and once again, this is the Gen 1. The Gen 2 replaced the stock assembly with a AR-15 receiver extension and a Magpul stock. I think that was a mistake. The military spec in the Gen 1 uses this sort of rectangular profile receiver extension. It's very solid, much more solid feeling than an AR-15 receiver extension. And a buttstock that is inspired by the M4 buttstock, but is unique to this rifle. This has many different lengths of pull. Let's see if I can count them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I guess 5 or 6. Sorry. Whereas this has basically 3 lengths of pull. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, 4. The Galil gives you more options. At its longest length, it is definitely presents a longer length of pull, significantly longer than the ARX. Whereas at its shortest length of pull, it's about the same. So I would consider that an advantage to the Galil. Okay, at its shortest length of pull, it is actually still longer than the ARX, but I would still consider that to be a more practical length of pull. Accuracy-wise, your mileage may vary. My Galil is more accurate than my ARX. Part of that is almost certainly due to the trigger. The IWI called this trigger the Galil sniper trigger, trying to imply that it was based off of the Galil sniper rifle. I'm not sure that's true. It is, however, a pretty good trigger. AKs in general have pretty good triggers, not fantastic, but good. And I would say this is absolutely par for the course for an AK. A good 2-stage trigger, not a terribly well-defined wall on the second stage, but good nonetheless. I would say this is at least as good and probably better than most mil-spec ARs. Let's see the reset. Good, audible, firm, tactile reset. The Galil, the ARX on the other hand, has a single stage trigger that is very crisp, but fairly heavy. Let's see here. Fairly heavy, also having a very strong audible and tactile reset. This one is plastic plastic, you can feel it. I can't really describe it very well, but something about it just feels a little bit less smooth than a steel trigger, at least a good one like the Galil has. Iron sights. This one I have replaced the factory iron sights with AR-15 sights, so it's not necessarily a fair comparison. The Galil, the Gen 2, they dispensed with iron sights entirely. The Gen 1 ACE has the same sights as the old Galil micro assault rifle. So it adjusts sort of like an M16A1, and it's got tritium inserts on it in both the front and rear, so you can, I'm not sure I can get it to co-witness on camera, but it's, I'd say they're pretty good sights really, all in all. The front is well protected, and the post is tapered sort of like an M16A1 instead of the A2. But I would definitely say between the factory rifles, a Gen 1 Galil has better sights than the ARX. The top rail. The top rail on the ARX is a true monolithic design. The top rail on the Galil, on the other hand, is not really monolithic. It looks monolithic, but the rail on the top cover is not at all joined to the gas tube rail. Let's see if I can disassemble it. There we go. As you see, the rail and the optic come with it, whereas the gas tube stays in place. The recoil spring is an AK-47 design instead of the more modern AKM, AK-74 design. And I believe, while some people like to think that makes it higher quality, because it looks more solid and feels a little bit smoother, because it's a telescoping design instead of two sort of chain links. I would say this is one of the Galil's downsides. It is more difficult to disassemble than an AKM, and this is one reason why. Let's see. Okay, so also the Galil has a much longer takedown button than an AK. Because the guide rod telescopes, it has no give in it laterally like this, or very little. Whereas the AK, you can just slide right out like this. The Galil, it takes a little bit more technique. It's not hard, but it's harder than the AK. And there's the bolt and bolt carrier, and here's the gas tube rail. Notice that it vents out the side just like the AK-47, and the gas rail and top cover have this key. It sort of mates up like this. The gas tube does not, like an AK, which has a latch so you can lift it off. The gas tube slides back to the rear. I believe this is another example of backwards thinking versus the AK. I think the AK design makes more sense. It's simply easier to disassemble and reassemble, and you can also fire the AK without the top cover at all, whereas with the Galil, that's not necessarily a thing. But you can see the receiver. While IWI sometimes tried to convince you that it had a polymer receiver, this part here is nothing but a mag well and the fire control group housing and the pistol grip. The receiver itself is very much a machined bar stock receiver, just like the old Galils of yore. Machining is top-notch. I used to have a Bulgarian SLR-95 milled receiver AK, and this receiver is head and shoulders nicer machined than the Bulgies did. But fire control group is very similar to an AK. So you can also look inside and see the barrel some. Factory, the Galil ACE used this big honking fat but short polymer handguard. Ergonomically, that's kind of strange. Mine came with this Midwest Industries rail. I swapped this on initially, but swapped the Midwest Industry rails right back promptly. So this rail has let's see here, these built-in Picatinny rails, and at least one of them actually has this sort of place for a tape switch for a light, so that's kind of neat. But aside from that, this rail would probably protect your hand very well from heat, but other than that, it's just a strange feeling rail. The ARX, on the other hand, people have compared to an AK, And while I wouldn't say that's quite appropriate, it's similar. Similar enough that I think that's a good thing. As I showed in my last video, this has a grenade launcher rail underneath, and it also has a Picatinny rail you can add. But I like this just factory cover the best. So I disassembled both rifles so we can do some comparisons on the internal parts. As I said, I've got a K&S piston on this. But first of all, bolt handles. The Galil bolt handle is quite nice. It's knurled and has a good shape to it. The Beretta handle is actually very similar in size and shape when you add on this aftermarket button. However, as it ships, it's this little monstrosity that is decidedly inferior to the Galil bolt handle. Bolts themselves, let's see. Bolts themselves, the Beretta bolt is obviously much bigger. It is AR-15 inspired, at least in the bolt head. It's got dual extractors so that it can switch sides on the ejection, and one of those extractors, whichever one is not being used as an extractor, is actually the ejector. The Galil, on the other hand, is a straight-up copy of the AK. This bolt, I think, is one of the problems with the Galil, the ARX design. One of my viewers, Outside Ed, or Outside, I'm not sure exactly how that's pronounced, but he says that he had actually a slam fire that led to an out-of-battery discharge on the Beretta. I think he was using soft CCI primers at the time. I seem to recall Michiko mentioning that I think it was Jay on Michiko's channel had some problems with the firing pin on his as well. Either way, the ARX piston and bolt is unique to the ARX. It's not really a copy of anything. Whereas the Galil is very much a copy of the AK. And that's a good thing to copy. The AK, of course, is an extremely mature design that has been thoroughly combat vetted. The Israelis themselves have been making Galils, which are functionally identical to this, since the early 70s, and they've had plenty of exposure to Black AKs as well, dating even earlier than that. So I feel that this is a more well-refined, we'll say, design than the ARX. The ARX is not fully mature. It's smooth, but it also, the ARX, as I mentioned in its video, the cam track is a little bit reminiscent of the cam track on an AK. It's not like it's a little bit different than an AR-15 or an AR-180 or something like that. The recoil springs. The ARX recoil spring reminds me of an AK a bit. It's much flimsier feeling, but it can be assembled incorrectly, which is a minor downside, I would say. One neat feature of the ARX that is not present on the Galil is the ability to remove the barrel without tools. How usable a feature that is, I'm not really entirely sure. It's rare to find spare barrels for these, and there were never really any caliber conversions, at least available in the United States. But if nothing else, it's a cool party trick. and it allows you to clean the barrel a little bit easier. The barrel contour is very similar. Both of them are cold hammer forged, 5.56 NATO chambered barrels. Both of them came with M16A2 style birdcage flash hiders from the factory. Though again, mine has the Lantac tracking. Now we've got them back together, I folded the stocks on both, so you can see how they look. The Beretta has this sort of latch in the back. That's how the rifle takes down. It's just a cover that blocks the rearward path of the bolt. Whereas the Galil has, I mean, it's just the hinge, and it secures to the receiver with either 1 or 2 roll pins. Apparently, both designs have been used. As you can see, this rifle is a true import, made in Israel, whereas my Beretta is made in America, at least partially made in America. Viewed from the other side, the Galil somehow looks a little bit tidier folded. The Beretta definitely will fire and cycle with the stock folded. I think the Galil will as well, but I've never tried it. You know, if nothing else, you could always collapse it to give the ejection port a little bit more room. The Galil magwell is a little bit more generous than the Beretta magwell. I mean, there's no beveling at all on the Beretta, whereas there is some on the Galil. I should mention as well, obviously my Galil is the Stanag version. Globally, most of the Galil ACEs you'll see use the old Galil magazine instead of the NATO magazine. And here stateside, many people either buy the Galil mag version or convert the Stanag version to the Galil. I think that's sort of a mistake. I mean, I think the biggest advantage the Galil ACE has over the Galil is that NATO magwell. It's well designed, well thought out. The mag buttons are good. I'm going to show how this stock opens up. Oh, and just look how tidy it is when it folds. That's one reason why I think switching to the AR-15 receiver extension on the Gen 2 was a mistake. It'd just be bulkier when folded. But whereas the Beretta locks in place, folded, the Galil is just held by friction. But there's a decent amount of friction. And let's see if we can, there we go. While it's difficult to fold, it's easy to lock into place, which is probably how it should be. The Galil hinge is a little bit more confidence-inspiring, and as well it should be. This is a copy of the old Galil hinge, which is itself a copy of the old FN Paratrooper FAL stock. So, well-tested, well-designed, versus new hotness, I guess. But as I mentioned, magazine catch is ambidextrous on both rifles, though it's more ergonomic on the Galil. Bolt hold open is the same, whereas the Beretta is ambidextrous, the Galil is not, but the Galil presents this larger button. There we go. And it can only be actuated on the one side, but it's well placed for the trigger finger of the right hand. That feature is absent on the Galil mag version. And that's kind of confusing when talking about a Galil, but of course there's the version that takes the old Galil mags instead of Rock and Lock mags instead of the NATO mags. On the Beretta, it functions pretty much the same, but it is ambidextrous. Also, notice how the Beretta has ejection ports on both sides. This is a much more ambidextrous rifle than the Galil. Both of these rifles, I guess I'll come to my summary, have their shortcomings, and they're kind of complementary. The Galil has, I think, a little bit better controls in some ways, the Beretta in others. Both overall are probably a little bit inferior to an AR-15 or a SIG Spear or MCX or a HK416 or any of those stoner derivative rifles. But the ARX is nice and lightweight, but it could be more accurate, and it feels a little bit flimsy and fragile. The Galil, on the other hand, is extremely heavy, but it is absolutely based on a well-proven combat design, and it exhibits top-notch build quality. It's a little bit more accurate as well. I tend to think of the ARX as the G36 I have at home, and the Galil I purchased with the thought, this is the AK-12 I have at home. Neither the G36 nor the AK-12 are necessarily superior combat rifles, and these versions, I would say, are certainly not better and possibly worse than, I mean, this is probably at least as good as the AK-12, but it is heavier. But just because they're not fantastic rifles doesn't mean they're bad rifles. I think they're both pretty good. Though, again, I've heard of more reliability, durability, and safety complaints with the ARX. The Galil, it's just a modern iteration of a tremendously well-proven classic. I guess that's about all I have to say. I'm not selling the ARX because I want to. I'm selling it because I need to free up some funds for something. So, you know, I was originally thinking about selling this instead, but when I sat down and really thought about it, this is the better rifle. And I think I would miss this one more than I miss the ARX. I enjoy shooting this one more than I enjoy shooting the ARX. So that's about all. Have a nice day.